Hey you guys, today we're going to talk about ratio and proportion, but first let's establish what a ratio actually is. A ratio is a comparison of two things. Now ratios are used a lot in the real world. Let's first establish the different ways that they can be written if you are comparing two things. The first way looks like this, A to B, and let's say that we're comparing apples to bananas. So I'm using the letters A and B. So A to B. Also, it can be written with a colon, A colon B. And last, it can be written as a fraction. And this is where a lot of ratio comparisons and how they're written when you're actually solving problems. So we'll be looking at this form a lot today. First thing I want to discuss today is a rate. Now, a rate is a ratio using different units in the comparison. So let's go shopping because a lot of people, grocery shopping is a necessary thing to do. So let's look here. This example, we're looking at a bottle of apple juice, and we see that the bottle of apple juice cost $1.60, and it's a bottle that is 64 ounces big. So this is a comparison, between two things, money and ounces. And a comparison using different units is called a rate. Now when you're shopping, you always want to make the better buy. So let's look to find out what the unit rate actually is. Unit rate here. A unit rate. A rate with the denominator of 1. So in this example here, it's like finding out what's the cost per ounce. We know what 64 ounces cost. It cost $1.60. But how would we figure out what is the cost of 1 ounce here? If you were thinking to divide these two numbers, then you are exactly right. So I'm going to put in my calculator 1.60 divided by 64. And looking at my calculator right now, it has 0.025. Okay, now let's talk about this. What was the unit on top? The unit on top was actually money. So what is this actually meaning? Money only goes to 2 decimal places here. So we're looking at this number. If it's 5 and above, then we're going to round this. So let's clean this a little bit. 0.03 dollars is the cost for 1 ounce. Now nobody really says, okay, $0.03. They only just say 3 cents. So you could write it this way if you wanted to, or you could write it like so, kind of like you did back in elementary school. So it's cost about 3 cents for every single ounce in this juice. That is finding a unit rate. The next thing I want to discuss is unit analysis. Unit analysis. All right? Unit analysis. What is that? The process when converting from one unit to another. So we're taking two pieces of information and we're converting it all into the same units. Key factor here. I'll write this down. When converting from one unit to another, you can use ratios that equal 1. You can use ratios that equal 1. For instance, 1 mile equals 5,280 feet. Then, if we write it as a ratio, the same information as a ratio, 1 mile over 5,280 feet, then it actually equals 1. It equals 1 because these two things here represent the same distance. The same distance, so it equals 1. So let's take our first example here. A football player runs a 40-yard dash in 4.4 seconds. What was the player's speed in miles per hour? We can all relate to miles per hour because we've been in a car. So how fast is 40 yards in 4.4 seconds? Let's establish what we need to do here. We need to convert the yards into miles, okay? And we also need to convert the seconds into hours. Now, when converting, what I like to do is take it one at a time. Now, you can do both at one time, but I like to take it one at a time. And so, let's actually work with the seconds and hours first. So, let's write down our information that we have. This guy runs 40 yards in 4.4 seconds. Now, keep your units going because units play an important role in unit analysis. What do we know? If we're going to work with the seconds and hours, we're going to multiply it by a ratio that equals 1, meaning the same information about seconds. What do you know about seconds? Well, I know that there's 60 seconds in 1 minute. Now, since I know this, when I'm going to use it in the unit analysis, I'm going to make sure that the units that I'm working with are diagonal from each other. So I know that seconds needs to be up here. So I said 60 seconds are in 1 minute. Why does this need to happen? Well, remember, we're converting. So we're trying to get rid of the seconds and go to hour. So these will cross cancel. All right, let's just multiply across. 40 times 60 is 240, or 2,400. And what unit is up there? We have yards. On the bottom, we have 4.4 times 1, which is 4.4. And what unit do we have now? Minutes. All right, so far, we have converted from seconds to minutes. But remember, we want to go to hours. So what piece of information do you know about minutes and hours? I know that there's 60 minutes in 1 hour. So where does minutes need to go? Minutes needs to go diagonal. Okay, so 60 minutes are in 1 hour. And what happens? The units of minutes cancel each other out. Let's just multiply across. 2,400 times 60. I'm going to come down here. 144,000. And what unit is up top? Yards. On the bottom, 4.4 times 1 is still 4.4, and now look what we have, the unit of hour. So we are halfway there. We have converted seconds to hours. Now let's take care of our yards and miles. What piece of information do you know about a mile and yards? I hope you can remember that there is 1,760 yards in 1 mile. So where should this go? Yards is up here. So that means my yards unit has to go down here with the appropriate information, which is 1,760. And that is 1 mile up top. All right, let's cross cancel our units. Yards will cross cancel with yards. So what's up top? 144,000 times 1 is still that same thing. What unit do we have up top? We have miles now. Perfect. On bottom, 4.4 times 1,760 is 7,744. And what unit is down there? Hours. All right, we're looking good. Check it out. We started with yards, and now we're at miles. We started at seconds, and now we're at hours. So how are we going to simplify these numbers? I hope you say divide, because you are exactly right. We are going to divide 144,000 divided by 7,744. What does that come out to be? 18.6. That is miles per 1 hour. So this guy is running at a speed of 18.6 miles an hour. Rounded up, about 19 miles an hour. So think about that. Think about driving in the car at 19 miles an hour and looking out your window and seeing this football player run right beside you, because that's how fast he can run 40 yards. Pretty impressive, I do believe. Let's talk about one more thing. A proportion. What is a proportion? A proportion is two ratios that are equal to each other. So how do you solve proportions? Well, we're going to solve proportions by cross multiplying. So let's take our first proportion here. These are going to be equal to each other. So we want to find what is the unknown that makes them equal to each other. Let's cross multiply. We're going to take the top number here and multiply it by the bottom number over there. 5 times 9, and that is 45. Equal sign in the middle. Let's take the other part. C times 6, which is 6C. Now notice when you're doing cross multiplication here, or cross products, that I'm not putting this information back in a fraction. It is on one level. One level. So remember that. Don't rewrite it into a fraction. Put it on one level. Now let's actually solve this. If we were going to get C by itself, we would divide by 6. Divide by 6. And we would have that C equals 45 divided by 6 is 7.5. So that's the number that would be here to make sure that these two fractions actually equal each other. Let me just show you what it would be if you wanted to look. 5 over 6 equals 7.5 over 9. So we're going to check to see. Not real familiar, and you guys are not real familiar possibly looking at a decimal over a number. Let's convert these both sides to decimals so you can see the comparison. So 5 divided by 6 is 0.8333, and it repeats. So what is 7.5 divided by 9? And you will actually see in your calculator that 0.8333 repeating is exactly this fraction as well. So they equal each other. Now it can get a little bit more elaborate. Let's look at one more example here. We have d minus 7 over 4, and that equals 2d plus 1 over 3. How do we solve a proportion? We solve a proportion by cross multiplying. We have 3 times both of these things here. So let me show you what I do to establish what I'm multiplying. I'm multiplying 3 times that top numerator over there, equals. I'm also taking 4 and multiplying it by the 2d plus 1. So 4, open parentheses, 2d plus 1. More than one thing, when there's more than one thing in a numerator or a denominator, I'm going to use parentheses to keep that quantity all together. And now you should see this equation here that we're going to have to use the distributive property. Let's distribute. 3 times d is 3d. 3 times negative 7 is negative 21. 4 times 2d is 8d. 4 times 1 is 4. Make a decision. Where do I want my letters? I'm going to take them to the left. So I'm going to subtract 8d to the other side. 3d minus 8d is negative 5d. Bring down my negative 21 and my 4 because that is gone. I'm going to take 21 to the other side by adding it. So I have negative 5d equals 4 plus 21 is 25. Divide by negative 5. And I have found out that my unknown is negative 5. So if I put negative 5 in this spot and this spot and simplified that expression, both of these ratios would equal each other, which establishes that it is a proportion. Now we'll work furthermore in class. Make sure you bring all of your questions and we'll go from there.